Jack Harrison stood at the viewport of the massive Confederation vessel, staring at the blue-green sphere of Earth growing smaller in the distance. It had been 3 months since the aliens arrived, and humanity was still reeling from the revelation that they were not alone in the universe. The Galactic Confederation had appeared suddenly with their enormous ships and incomprehensible technology. They weren't hostile, which was a blessing, but they weren't particularly impressed with humanity either. As it turned out, Earth was just another primitive world among thousands, barely worth noting except for its abundant resources and labor pool. Still homesick human. The voice belonged to Commander Zexkar, a tall, insectoid being with gleaming carapace and compound eyes that reflected Jack's image back at him multiple times. Not homesick, Jack replied evenly. Just thinking. Your kind does that too much, Zexkar chittered, mandibles clicking in what Jack had come to recognize as amusement. Action is preferable to contemplation. Jack nodded without answering. No point arguing with his new employer. After 15 years as a Marine Corps sniper with 4 tours in various global hotspots, Jack had found himself recruited as a security specialist for the Confederation. In reality, he was little more than a glorified bodyguard, muscle considered disposable by the advanced races of the galaxy. We'll be arriving at Station Epsilon in 6 hours, Zexkar continued. The delegation from the core worlds will be expecting adequate protection. You and the other humans will form the outer perimeter. Outer perimeter, the furthest position from the important people. Jack had quickly learned where humans stood in the galactic hierarchy. Understood, Commander, he replied. When Zexkar left, Jack made his way to the mess hall where other humans gathered between shifts. The room buzzed with conversation as he grabbed a tray of the bland protein paste that passed for food among the Confederation species. Hey, Harrison, called a voice from across the room. Jack spotted Olivia Martinez waving him over. Her uniform bore the insignia of Earth's recently formed United Defense Force, the military liaison group to the Confederation. Lieutenant, Jack acknowledged as he sat across from her. Drop the rank, she said with a tired smile. We're all equally unimportant out here. Jack glanced around at the 24 other humans in the hall. Any news from home? Olivia's expression darkened. More recruitment requests. The Confederation needs bodies for their expansion efforts. Cannon fodder, you mean, said Jack. Can't argue with that assessment, Olivia replied, lowering her voice. But there's something else. Intelligence reports about a species called the Varaxians. They've begun aggressive movements along the outer rim. Jack raised an eyebrow. A threat to the Confederation. Potentially. They've already taken 3 border worlds with minimal resistance. Their conversation was interrupted by the ship's communication system. Attention all personnel. Emergency protocol engage. Proceed to battle stations. The humans looked at each other in confusion. This wasn't a scheduled drill. Minutes later, they stood in the ship's massive command center as a holographic display showed a fleet of unknown vessels entering the system. The alien ships were angular, with predatory lines that reminded Jack of hunting knives. Varaxian Battle Group, announced the ship's captain, a tall humanoid with pale blue skin. They'd followed us from the outer colonies. Jack watched as Confederation officers rushed to stations, barking orders in their various languages. The translator in his ear struggled to keep up with the technical jargon. All human security units to armory, came the order. Prepare for possible boarding action. As Jack and the other humans filed out, he overheard 2 Confederation officers speaking. The primates with their projectile weapons, one said dismissively. What use will they be against Varaxian battle armor? They die slowly enough to distract the enemy, replied the other. That's all we need from them. Jack kept his face expressionless as he continued down the corridor. He'd been underestimated before. Sometimes, being overlooked was the greatest advantage a soldier could have. As the alarm klaxons continued to wail, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Jack stood alongside 50 other humans in the massive hangar bay of the Confederation cruiser, They had been issued standard-issue plasma rifles, but Jack had insisted on keeping his ballistic sidearm as well, much to the amusement of the alien quartermasters. These primitives and their projectile weapons, a six-limbed technician had muttered while handing out equipment. Might as well give them pointed sticks. The Varaxian threat had been temporarily neutralized when Confederation reinforcements arrived, forcing the enemy ships to retreat. Now, 3 weeks later, Jack found himself on guard duty during a strategic briefing between Confederation military leaders. Behind the energy barrier separating the conference room from the security detail, holographic displays showed battle formations and weapon specifications. Though Jack wasn't supposed to be paying attention to the meeting content, his sniper's eye for detail caught everything. "The Varaxians have adapted their shield harmonics," said Admiral Galeron, a tall aquatic being whose skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. "Our energy weapons require 3 concentrated bursts to penetrate their defenses. Their targeting systems are superior as well," added another officer. "Long-range combat heavily favors their forces." Jack noticed something interesting about the shield specifications scrolling across one display. The Varaxian defensive systems operated in patterns, predictable patterns. Every 90 seconds, there was a millisecond fluctuation during the energy cycling process. "Harrison, focus on your sector," whispered Greg Porter, another human guard positioned beside him. Jack nodded but continued observing. The weakness he spotted wouldn't matter to energy weapons. They were too slow to exploit such a brief window. But a bullet? A bullet could potentially thread that needle. After the shift ended, Jack made his way to the human quarters where Olivia Martinez was reviewing deployment orders. "Lieutenant, got a minute?" he asked. She glanced up from her tablet. "What's on your mind, Harrison? I noticed something during the briefing. The Varaxian shields have a cycling pattern that what? Could be exploited by our obsolete weapons." Olivia shook her head. "The Confederation made it clear. Ballistic weapons are museum pieces out here." "With respect, they're wrong," Jack insisted. "A precisely timed shot could penetrate those shields during the cycling phase. Energy weapons are too slow, but a bullet at the right moment." "Even if you're right, no one would listen," Olivia interrupted. "Humans are muscle, not strategists. We're assigned to close combat units precisely because our weapons technology is considered primitive." Jack's expression hardened. "I've seen the casualty reports. 80% of frontline losses are human troops. They're using us as human shields." "I know," Olivia admitted, her voice quieter. "But what can we do?" Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement. All security personnel were ordered to assemble for deployment briefing. Another Varaxian attack had struck a Confederation colony. In the briefing room, Commander Zexkar outlined the situation. "The colony on Helios Prime has been overrun. Ground forces are needed for evacuation support. Human units will establish the forward perimeter." As the tactical display showed the deployment zones, Jack recognized the familiar pattern. Humans positioned directly in the line of fire, while Confederation specialists operated from protected positions. "Questions?" Zexkar asked perfunctorily. Jack raised his hand. "Sir, has anyone considered using ballistic weapons against the Varaxian shields? There may be a vulnerability during their cycling sequence." The room fell silent before erupting in chittering laughter from multiple alien species. "Primitive thinking from a primitive species," Zexkar said dismissively. "Their shield technology has been developed over centuries. Your metal projectiles would shatter against them like rain on stone." As the briefing concluded, an older human soldier named Ben Rogers approached Jack. "I heard what you said about the shields," Ben whispered. "I was a sniper too, back home. If you've spotted something, I'm interested." Jack nodded. "Find me after deployment. And spread the word to any other former snipers. We might need to remind these aliens what humans can do with outdated technology." The evacuation of Helios Prime had gone badly. 3 days of intense fighting had left the human contingent at less than half strength, while Confederation forces maintained minimal casualties by keeping their distance from the front lines. Jack had seen the pattern repeat itself on 3 different worlds now, and each time the Varaxians gained more territory. Back aboard the Confederation carrier, Jack sat in the medical bay while a technician treated a plasma burn on his shoulder. 2 beds over, he spotted a familiar face, a woman with short blonde hair and a scar across her left cheek. "Susan," Jack called out, surprised. "Susan Bailey." The woman turned, her eyes widening with recognition. "Jack Harrison. Never thought I'd see you off-world." 8 years ago, Susan had been Jack's spotter during his second tour. They had made an exceptional team until an IED had ended her military career, or so he'd thought. "What are you doing here?" Jack asked when the medical technician finally moved away. "Same as you. Taking whatever work they offer us," Susan replied with a bitter smile. "I'm assigned to the intelligence unit, mostly translation and data entry, but it keeps me close to the action." Jack lowered his voice. "Have you been watching their battle tactics?" Susan nodded. "The Varaxians are getting bolder. They've taken 6 more colony worlds since we shipped out. And noticed how they're using humans as meat shields." Susan's voice hardened. "Yeah, I've noticed. Confederation casualties are at 16%. Human casualties are at 73% and climbing." Jack glanced around to ensure no aliens were within earshot. "I need to show you something. Meet me in the auxiliary observation deck at 2200 hours." Later that night, Jack and Susan stood before a small terminal Jack had accessed using codes borrowed from Olivia's tablet. The screen displayed technical specifications of Varaxian shield systems. "See that?" Jack pointed to a cycling pattern in the energy output. "Every 90 seconds, there's a 3-millisecond window when the shields recalibrate. It's not enough time for energy weapons to penetrate, but a bullet would get through." Susan finished, studying the data. "If you timed it precisely." "Exactly. I've been collecting ballistic data on Varaxian deployments. Wind patterns, gravity variations, atmospheric density. It's different on every world, but the principles remain the same." Susan's eyes lit up with understanding. "You want to form a sniper unit. I've already found 5 other former snipers on board. Ben Rogers served with the British SAS. Carly Pearson was Australian Special Forces. The Confederation will never approve it," Susan warned. "They think our weapons are jokes." Jack pulled out a data chip from his pocket. "That's why we need to prove it works first. I've been designing custom rounds that should maximize penetration during the shield window." Their planning was interrupted by an emergency alert. Jack and Susan rushed to the main hangar where Confederation officers were assembling troops. Admiral Galeron's voice echoed through the chamber. "The Varaxian fleet has broken through our defensive line at Proxima Station. 3 core worlds are now vulnerable to direct attack." A holographic display showed the strategic situation, a dire one. The Varaxians had outmaneuvered the Confederation forces and now held a position threatening the most populated worlds in the sector. Olivia Martinez spotted Jack and Susan in the crowd and made her way over to them. "Harrison, it's worse than it looks," she said quietly. "High Command is considering abandoning the outer colonies entirely, including Earth's solar system." Jack's jaw tightened. "We need to speak with whoever's in charge, now." "Why would they listen to us?" Olivia asked. "Because we might have the only weapon that can turn this war around," Susan interjected. "A weapon they've been laughing at since we arrived." Olivia studied their faces, then nodded slowly. "There's a strategy session in 30 minutes. I can get you 5 minutes with Commander Alan Wright." "That's all we need," Jack said, determination hardening his features. 5 minutes to explain how Earth snipers can hit what their technology can't touch. Commander Alan Wright was not what Jack expected. Unlike most Confederation officers, the tall, slender alien with silvery skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern actually seemed to listen as Jack explained his theory about the Varaxian shield vulnerability. "Fascinating hypothesis. Human," Wright said when Jack finished, "but untested and therefore worthless. Give us one chance to prove it, Jack urged. A single mission. Wright's upper eyes blinked independently of his lower ones. The Confederation does not risk resources on unproven human intuition. With respect, Commander, Olivia interjected, the Confederation is losing this war using proven tactics. Perhaps unproven ones deserve consideration. Susan stepped forward. We're not asking for a battalion. Just permission to assemble a small team of Earth's best snipers. Wright's expression was unreadable, but his silence suggested contemplation. Finally, he spoke. One mission. Unsanctioned and unofficial. If you fail, you will be court-martialed for insubordination. And if we succeed? Jack asked. Then perhaps humans have more to offer than their capacity to die bravely. Wright turned away. Lieutenant Martinez will provide limited logistical support. You have 48 hours to assemble your team. Once Wright left, Olivia turned to Jack and Susan. That went better than expected. What now? Now we gather the best shooters humanity has to offer, Jack replied. Within 12 hours, Jack had assembled his team in an unused storage bay that Susan had repurposed as their planning room. Then Rogers, the former SAS sniper, was examining one of Jack's custom ammunition designs. Carly Pearson, tall and wiry with a perpetual frown, was reviewing atmospheric data from potential target worlds. 3 other snipers completed the team. Kyle Johnson, a broad-shouldered former police marksman who had been working Confederation security. Patricia Hayes, who had spent 8 years as a competitive shooting champion before joining the Colonial Defense Force. And Noah Garcia, the youngest of the group but with natural talent that had earned him multiple commendations during Earth's last regional conflict. The Varaxians have established a command outpost on Novus 7, Jack explained, pointing to a holographic terrain map. Their Supreme Commander Krasik is personally overseeing operations from this ridge position. Susan highlighted a rocky outcrop overlooking the Varaxian base. This position gives us line of sight to their command center, but it's 2.8 kilometers away with variable crosswinds and lower gravity than Earth standard. That's beyond effective range for standard rifles, Ben commented. Which is why I've been working on these, Jack replied, revealing a case containing 6 modified sniper rifles. I've adapted the barrel composition to withstand the custom rounds designed specifically for Novus 7's atmospheric conditions. Kyle examined one of the weapons skeptically. Even with these modifications, hitting a target at that range within a 3-millisecond window seems impossible. Hitting a moving target through a 3-inch opening at 1 mile seemed impossible back on Earth too, Jack countered. Until we did it. Patricia spoke up. The real challenge will be calculating the exact moment when the shields cycle down. Miss that window by even a millisecond. We won't miss, Susan interrupted, bringing up another display. I've developed a predictive algorithm based on observed Varaxian shield patterns. It will give us a 5-second countdown to each vulnerability window. Noah, who had been quietly studying the terrain map, finally spoke. The Confederation doesn't believe this will work. They're setting us up to fail. Jack nodded. Probably. But while they're expecting us to fail, the Varaxians aren't expecting us at all. They've never encountered human snipers before. How do we get to Novus 7? Carly asked. We need transportation. That's where I come in, said Olivia, entering the room. I secured a scout vessel under the pretense of a reconnaissance mission. It's small, fast, and can get your team planetside without detection. Jack looked around at the assembled snipers. This is our one chance to prove what humans can do. If we succeed, we change the course of this war. If we fail, we won't fail, Susan said firmly. We're trained for the impossible. It's what we do. The small scout vessel descended through Novus 7's thin atmosphere, its stealth systems active. Jack checked his equipment one final time as Susan reviewed the topographical data on her tablet. The rest of the team sat in silence, each lost in their own pre-mission routines. 2 minutes to drop point, Olivia announced from the pilot's seat. Atmospheric conditions match our projections. Gravity at .8 Earth standard. Jack nodded. Remember, we'll have limited communications once we're on the surface. The Varaxians have sensor arrays scanning for Confederation frequencies. We don't need to talk, Carly said, adjusting her scope. We just need to shoot. The ship touched down in a narrow canyon, 3 kilometers from the ridge position they had identified. As the team disembarked, Olivia caught Jack's arm. The Confederation battle group will engage the Varaxian fleet in 6 hours, she said quietly. That's your window. After that, either we've gained an advantage or Earth becomes a footnote in galactic history, Jack finished. We understand the stakes. The trek to the ridge position took longer than anticipated. Novus 7's terrain was treacherous, with loose purple soil that shifted unexpectedly under their boots. The lower gravity made their movements awkward, especially with the heavy equipment they carried. Hold, Susan whispered, raising her hand. Ahead, the distinctive silhouette of a Varaxian patrol drone hovered near their planned route. The team froze, pressing themselves against the rocky outcropping. The drone paused, its sensors sweeping the area before continuing on its programmed path. They increased security, Ben observed once the drone was out of range. They must be planning something big. All the more reason to complete our mission, Jack replied. When they finally reached the ridge position, the view took their breath away. The Varaxian base sprawled across the valley below, a complex of angular structures surrounded by a shimmering energy barrier. Beyond it, the pink and orange sky of Novus 7 was filled with the shadows of warships in low orbit. Set up here, Jack ordered, pointing to a flat section of rock with clear line of sight to the base. The team worked methodically, assembling their rifles and calculating firing solutions for the alien environment. Susan set up her portable sensor array, carefully scanning the Varaxian base. I'm detecting their shield harmonics, she reported. The cycling pattern matches our predictions. 90.3 seconds between windows. Jack peered through his scope, studying the base layout. Any visual on the target? Central structure, Susan replied. 3rd level, chamber with the large viewports. That's where their command staff is gathered. Noah, who had the best position, confirmed through his scope. I can see movement inside. Multiple Varaxians in what appears to be a briefing. Below them, in the valley, they could see Confederation forces pinned down by Varaxian heavy artillery. The blue flashes of energy weapons looked pitiful against the overwhelming firepower of the Varaxian positions. Confederation troops are being slaughtered, Patricia said grimly. They'd got no chance without air support. They'll get something better than air support, Jack replied, continuing to study the base through his scope. Hours passed as they maintained their position, monitoring the shield cycles and refining their calculations. The temperature dropped as Novus 7's sun began to set, casting long shadows across the alien landscape. Target confirmed, Susan suddenly announced. Supreme Commander Krazik just entered the command chamber. Jack adjusted his position, settling into the familiar stance that felt like home despite the alien world beneath him. Susan began calculating the final firing solution, accounting for wind speed, gravity, and atmospheric density. This shot is beyond anything we've attempted, Kyle said, doubt creeping into his voice. Even if we time it perfectly with the shield cycle, there are too many variables. That's why they call it impossible, Jack replied calmly. Until someone does it. Susan's voice was steady as she fed Jack the final calculations. Wind speed variable between 8 and 10 knots from the northeast. Target distance 2.86 kilometers. First shield window in 40 seconds. Jack drew a slow breath, feeling time slow down as he entered the mental state that had made him legendary back on Earth. In his mind, there was nothing but the target, the bullet's path, and the fleeting window of opportunity that would come exactly once every 90 seconds. Ready when you are, he whispered. The ridge went silent except for the soft whisper of the alien wind. Jack's breathing slowed as he settled into position, his body becoming part of the rifle. Through his scope, he could see the Varaxian Supreme Commander Krazik, a tall, armored figure with distinctive red markings across its exoskeleton. The commander stood before a tactical display, gesturing with multiple limbs as it addressed subordinates. Range 2.86 kilometers, Susan murmured beside him. Wind shifting to 9 knots. Temperature dropping 2 degrees since last calculation. Jack made tiny adjustments to his aim, compensating for variables that would have seemed insurmountable to anyone but a veteran sniper. The custom round in his chamber had been specifically designed for this moment, slightly heavier than standard ammunition, with optimized aerodynamics for Novus 7's atmosphere. Shield cycle in 15 seconds, Susan continued, her voice calm and measured. Firing window will last 3 milliseconds. The other snipers watched through their own scopes, each ready to provide backup if Jack's shot failed. The tension was palpable as Susan began the countdown. 10 seconds. 9. 8. Jack's focus narrowed to a pinpoint. He could feel his heartbeat, deliberately slowing it between beats. 7. 6. 5. He made a final micro-adjustment for a subtle shift in the wind. 4. 3. Jack's finger rested lightly on the trigger, applying the precise pressure needed. 2. 1. He held his breath. Mark. Jack squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against his shoulder, the sound echoing across the ridge. The custom round left the barrel at over 3,000 feet per second, beginning its long journey toward the Varaxian base. Bullet in flight, Susan announced, starting a second stopwatch. For what seemed like an eternity, nothing happened. The team remained frozen in position, waiting. At this distance, the bullet would take nearly 8 seconds to reach its target, an eternity for a sniper waiting to confirm impact. 3 seconds, Susan counted. Jack did not blink, did not breathe. 5 seconds. Through his scope, Jack could see the shimmering barrier of the Varaxian shield, seemingly impenetrable. 7 seconds. Time seemed to stretch infinitely as the team watched. 8.1 seconds. Through their scopes, they saw it happen. A momentary flash as the bullet passed through the shield's cycling window, the infinitesimal gap in the Varaxian defenses. Then, inside the command center, Supreme Commander Krazik suddenly jerked backward, a spray of dark fluid erupting from its head. Hit confirmed, Ben whispered in disbelief. The command center erupted into chaos. Varaxian officers scattered in all directions, security alarms blaring across the compound. The shields around the base intensified, solidifying into a continuous barrier without cycling. They're locking down, Susan reported, already packing her equipment. We need to move. Now. Wait, Jack said, still watching through his scope. Look at their response pattern. Below, the Varaxian forces were in disarray. Units that had been advancing on Confederation positions suddenly halted, receiving contradictory orders or no orders at all. The coordinated attack had dissolved into confusion. Their command structure is hierarchical, Jack explained. Without Krazik, the chain of command is broken. The team quickly dismantled their position, erasing all evidence of their presence as they prepared to withdraw. In the distance, they could hear the whine of Varaxian search drones deploying from the base. Did you see their faces? Noah asked with a grin as they moved back toward the extraction point. The bullet went right through where they thought nothing could penetrate. One shot, Patricia remarked. 8 seconds of flight time through a 3-millisecond window at nearly 3 kilometers. That's going in the record books, if they believe it happened at all. As they made their way back through the rugged terrain, Susan's communicator vibrated with an encoded message from Olivia. Confederation forces are reporting a sudden disruption in Varaxian operations, she announced. They're pushing forward across all sectors. Jack nodded, allowing himself a small smile. Humans just changed the course of an interstellar war, and we did it with a weapon they called obsolete. In the distance, they could see their extraction vessel appearing over the horizon, its lights flashing the retrieval signal. The impossible had just become possible, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Confederation War Council chamber fell silent as Jack and his team entered. Admiral Galeron stood at the center of the circular room, surrounded by holographic displays showing battle reports from across the sector. Commander Wright gestured for the humans to approach. 3 days ago, this council dismissed your proposal as primitive desperation. Wright began, his 4 eyes fixed on Jack. Today, we are reassessing that judgment in light of unexpected results. The main display shifted to show footage from Novus 7. The Varaxian retreat had been total and immediate following the death of Supreme Commander Krasik. Without central leadership, their forces had fractured into competing factions, each withdrawing to secure their own positions. The shot was impossible, stated a reptilian officer from the tactical division. Our analysis confirms the ballistic projectile penetrated a shield designed to withstand concentrated energy weapons fire. The timing required exceeds the reaction capability of most known species. Jack stood straight, facing the council without speaking. Susan and the other snipers remained at attention behind him. We have received 17 requests for human sniper units from fleet commanders across 3 sectors, Admiral Galeron announced. The Varaxians have already begun redesigning their shield systems, but such modifications will take months to implement. We have a strategic window, Wright added, one created by weapons we considered obsolete. Olivia stepped forward with a datapad. We've prepared deployment options for human sniper units across key battlefronts. With your approval, Admiral, we can begin training and equipment production immediately. The council members exchanged glances, their various alien features expressing emotions Jack couldn't fully interpret. Finally, Admiral Galeron nodded. Proceed, Lieutenant Martinez. Commander Harrison will oversee the tactical integration of human sniping techniques into our combat doctrine. Jack raised an eyebrow at the unexpected promotion. Commander Harrison. It had a strange ring to it. Within weeks, the war changed dramatically. Human snipers deployed across the front lines, targeting Varaxian officers through brief vulnerabilities in their defensive systems. The Confederation, once dismissive of human tactics, now positioned their forces specifically to create opportunities for Earth's marksmen. Jack found himself in a hastily established training facility aboard the Confederation flagship. Susan had been promoted to tactical advisor, developing prediction algorithms for shield cycling patterns across various Varaxian vessel classes. The latest batch of recruits is showing promise, Susan reported as they observed a training session. 30 humans, and surprisingly, a dozen non-human Confederation species were practicing with modified sniper rifles. I never expected Zexkar's people to adopt ballistic weapons, Jack remarked, watching the insectoid trainees adjusting their grip to accommodate their unique physiology. They're adaptable, Susan replied, more adaptable than they first appeared. The trillions still struggle with the recoil, but their visual acuity makes them exceptional spotters. The training facility door slid open, and Olivia entered with a Confederation intelligence officer. We've intercepted Varaxian communications, Olivia announced. They're calling Earth snipers invisible death. Their field commanders are refusing to exit their vessels during planetary operations. Jack nodded. Psychological warfare was always part of a sniper's impact. Fear is as effective as bullets sometimes. There's more, the intelligence officer added. 3 Varaxian battle groups have withdrawn completely from contested systems. Their high command is demanding shield technology that cycles randomly rather than predictably. Can they develop that? Susan asked. Eventually, the officer replied. But not before we've pushed them back beyond their original borders. That evening, Jack found himself summoned to Admiral Galeron's private chambers. The aquatic alien skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as he studied star charts. Commander Harrison, Galeron acknowledged. The Confederation Council has voted unanimously to elevate Earth's status from protectorate to full member world. Jack kept his expression neutral, though inside he felt a surge of pride. That's good news, Admiral. Indeed. Your species has proven more valuable than anticipated. Galaran's large eyes fixed on Jack. The Varaxians have requested peace negotiations. Already, Jack couldn't hide his surprise. Fear is a powerful motivator, Galaran replied. Their leadership structure cannot function if every commander believes they may be eliminated at any moment from an unseen threat. Jack nodded slowly. What happens now? Now, Galaran said, the Confederation learns from humanity, even as humanity learns from us. Your primitive weapons have revealed our technological arrogance. Perhaps there are other human strategies we have overlooked. As Jack left the Admiral's chambers, he paused at a viewport overlooking the vast fleet. Somewhere in the distance was Earth, no longer just another primitive world, but a respected member of galactic society. All because of one impossible shot. 6 months after the shot that changed the course of the war, Jack stood at the observation deck of the newly commissioned Earth Embassy on the Confederation capital world. The sprawling metropolis stretched in every direction, its towers reaching toward the twin suns overhead. Beside him, Susan reviewed the final plans for the Interspecies Combat Academy. The first class has 300 students from 27 different species, Susan reported. Even the Drillicians have sent representatives, and they're notoriously isolationist. Jack nodded, scanning the cityscape. And how many from Earth? 50 instructors, and over 100 advanced students. Earth is now the third most requested posting in the Confederation military training program. The peace treaty with the Varaxian Empire had been signed 2 months ago. Their forces had withdrawn completely from Confederation space, their once fearsome war machine humbled by the revelation of its vulnerability. The Supreme Commander who replaced Krasik had personally requested human security advisors to help redesign their defensive systems. Ambassador Palmer wants to see us before the ceremony, Susan reminded him. Jack checked the time. We should head down. They made their way through the embassy, passing groups of humans and aliens working side by side. Earth's diplomatic status had transformed almost overnight. Where once humans had been relegated to menial positions, now they were sought after as tactical advisors and combat specialists. In the embassy's main hall, representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for the unveiling of the new Confederation military doctrine, one that formally incorporated human combat techniques alongside advanced alien technology. Commander Harrison, called Olivia, now serving as Earth's military attaché. She approached with a tall, elegant Varaxian diplomat. Allow me to introduce Representative Zeltor of the Varaxian Diplomatic Corps. Jack nodded respectfully to the alien. Representative. The Varaxian's mandibles clicked softly before it spoke. The shot that killed Supreme Commander Krasik. It was yours, was it not? It was a team effort, Jack replied diplomatically. Zeltor's compound eyes studied Jack with unsettling intensity. Our military analysts calculated 17 different factors that should have made that shot impossible. They still debate how it succeeded. Jack allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the most effective precisely because they're unexpected. A lesson my people have learned at great cost. The Varaxian acknowledged. We had become too reliant on technological superiority. We forgot that innovation often comes from necessity rather than advancement. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Galaran and the Confederation High Council. The ceremony was about to begin. Jack took his place on the stage alongside Susan, Ben, Carly, Kyle, Patricia, and Noah, the original sniper team from Novus 7. Each wore the new insignia of the Earth Combat Division, a stylized rifle silhouette against a field of stars. Admiral Galaran addressed the assembled dignitaries. For centuries, the Confederation believed that technological advancement was the only path to military superiority. We discarded older combat methods as obsolete, viewing them as relics of a primitive past. The Admiral gestured toward the human snipers. These humans taught us the error of our thinking. With weapons we dismissed as antiquated, they accomplished what our most advanced systems could not. Today we formalize this lesson into Confederation doctrine. A holographic display activated, showing the new hybrid combat protocols. Human ballistic weapons paired with alien technology, creating defense systems with overlapping methodologies that left no singular vulnerability. After the ceremony, Jack found himself alone with Susan on a balcony overlooking the city. The first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. "Did you ever think a single bullet could change so much?" Susan asked. Jack shook his head. "When I joined the Confederation forces, I thought humans would always be second-class citizens in the galaxy, cannon fodder for alien wars. And now Earth has a seat on the Defense Council," Susan said with a smile. "All because they underestimated what humans could do with primitive weapons." In the distance, the lights of the new Interspecies Combat Academy illuminated the horizon. There, the next generation of snipers from 100 worlds would learn the art that humans had perfected over centuries, the art of making the impossible shot. "They're not laughing anymore," Jack said quietly. "And that's worth everything."